Welcome to Texting, where we consider issues relevant to Jewish life through the lens of classical and modern Torah texts. I'm your host, Elana Stein Hain. We're recording on Monday, November 18th, 2024. And if you're wondering, yes, the weather has already gotten colder. If you'd like to follow along with today's text, you can find the link to our source sheet in the episode description. Back when I was applying to high school, they asked me on the application what my greatest flaw was. And I said that it was that I'm competitive. Now, I think that's what we call a humble brag, because on the one hand, it means that maybe I can find myself being envious or feeling bad if I'm not at the top. But on the other hand, it's my way of saying that I work hard and I want to succeed. So I got into high school, though I assure you I have some clearly bigger flaws than that one. But in terms of competitiveness, as an adult, I really do try to focus more on being competitive with myself than with others. Because when you take away the brag aspect of competition, what you're left with is just jealousy. And jealousy is an ugly trait. There's no brag in claiming to be jealous. As the Bible scholar Anthony Ellis writes, kin'ah, jealousy, is a rivalrous emotion. That is, it describes the feelings of people who feel bad because they are comparing themselves with a rival and think that the comparison reflects badly on themselves. But I think there's a lot in this world that fosters jealousy, whether it's the easy ability to compare one's own life with the curated lives they see online, or simply the realization that forces both within and outside of our control lead to disparities that can be painful. And given that we're currently in the Torah readings of Breshit, Genesis, in which jealousy, especially among siblings, is a major theme, I thought we might take some time to think about jealousy, both on an individual and on a collective level. The text for today about jealousy is a midrash about the end of Moshe's life. It's Devarim Rabbah, or Deuteronomy Rabbah, chapter 9, section 9. Joining me today is Leora Batnitzky. Hi, Leora.
Hi, Elana.
You know, it's interesting when people think about jealousy, they often come up with the synonyms, envy, covet, or coveting, or covetousness. I'm wondering, from your perspective, how might you distinguish jealousy from other things we often think are synonymous with it?
Right. So there are many terms, as you mentioned: jealousy, envy, coveting. I think what distinguishes jealousy, and I think coveting as well from envy perhaps, is that jealousy tends to be about someone having something that you think you should have. Or I'll put it in the first person, that I think I should have. That's what being jealous is. Whereas envy may be more about wanting what someone else has, but maybe more aspirational. Meaning I see someone who is great at doing something, and I think, wow, I envy that person. But maybe that means that there are ways in which I might try to be able to be, for instance, say, a great athlete like that person. So watching sports, for instance, I think there's a kind of envy. Wow, look at those players. I wish I could be like that. But maybe that also means that we aspire in some sense to be that way. Whereas jealousy, I think, is really about a sense of entitlement. That should be mine, not that person's.
Okay, so where do you put coveting? Do you put coveting in the jealousy camp?
I think coveting is like jealousy. Coveting, I think, just emphasizes the desire aspect for what one is jealous of. I must have that. I want that.
Right, the coveting is at the object and the jealousy might be at the person.
Exactly.
Interesting. All right, well, let's see Moshe get jealous, because it'll make me feel better about my own problems. Okay, so here's the verse that we're working off of. Okay, it's Devarim, or Deuteronomy 31, verse 14. It's essentially, God says to Moshe, Hain karvu yamecha lamut, your time to die is drawing close. Call Joshua, and the two of you should stand in the tent of meeting, and I will command him. Notice the two of them are standing in the tent of meeting, or they're told to, but I will command him, Joshua. And so Moshe and Joshua went, they stood in the tent of meeting. That's what this midrash is playing off of, that one of the last things that Moshe is told to do. And here's how it goes. Kra et Yoshua, call Joshua. Amar lo, Moshe said to God, Ribono shel olam, sovereign of the universe, why don't you let Joshua take my position? And this way I can live as just a regular person. I don't want to die. I know I can't go into the land as Moses the leader, but maybe I can continue to live and go into the land as Moses the follower. So God says, sure, let's play this game. Let's try it. God says to him, okay, I want you to serve Joshua the way that Joshua served you. And so Moshe woke up early, went to Yehoshua, Joshua's house. Yehoshua got scared, and Moshe said, I suppose to respond immediately to the fear, my master, Rabbi, Boetzli, come to me. And the two of them went on a walk. And Moshe stood at the left side of Joshua. First thing I want to notice from the beginning of this is that Yehoshua seems to be afraid when Moshe shows up. Is he scared that maybe Moshe is going to give him bad news? Why is he afraid? And then Moshe quells that fear by saying, nope, you're my teacher now. I'm following you. And Yehoshua plays along. Leora, do you think it's going to last?
Well, I know how it's going to end. So I think one of the things that we see is, right, initially Yehoshua's discomfort with this change in their status. And then the question I think that we're seeing raised here is whether Moshe is going to be able to continue to handle this change in status. What's interesting is that God is going along with Moshe's idea. Yeah, give it a try. Let's see what happens. Let's see how you're going to be a regular person.
Right. It kind of feels like we're going to see something didactic here.
Yes.
Like instead of me telling you this isn't going to work, we're going to actually watch it not work. And I think it is interesting to consider that there's an altruism that Moshe is showing, saying, I don't have to be the leader. That's not what it's about for me. I can just be a regular person. And it's not about my status. It's actually about me being with the people, me going into the land, me having life, right? Like,
yes.
I think that's what we all want to think in our best moments of, no, it's not about what people think of me. It's not about my stature. It's just about living and being part of the things that matter in life, right?
Yes, but I think at the same time it's double-edged, as we'll see as this goes on, because Moshe does want to live, but which is of course completely understandable. He wants to go with the people, which is also understandable, but his life has come to an end. He doesn't want to accept the limits on his life, just like any human being, that it's going to end.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's going to be framed by the limits of life ending, but there are other limits that I think when we get jealous that we refuse to accept also. So let's see what happens. Nichnesu la'ohel moed. They entered the tent of meeting, as the verse said they were supposed to do. The pillar of cloud descended and created a partition between them. When the pillar of cloud ascended again, Moshe went to Yehoshua and said, so, what did the divine speech say to you behind that pillar of cloud? Right? I want us to imagine being Moshe, who has always been the one to get that access, standing outside as Yehoshua gains that access, and he literally has a smoke screen in front of him. So what does Yehoshua say to him? Kishaya hadibur nigla alecha. When the divine speech was revealed to you, I'm going to add all those years. Yodea ha'iti ma medaber imcha. Did I know what it was saying to you? This is like Rabbi Emeritus territory right here, right? You're losing access, seeing it given to someone else. And by the way, it's one thing if you decide to be altruistic and you say, oh, I'm going to walk on the left side. Apologies to all my lefties, including my kid. I'm going to walk on the left side of Yehoshua to show my reverence for him. That Moshe decided to do. But this moment of he can't hear the divine word, Moshe didn't choose that.
No.
It was thrust upon him. And he says, wait, I didn't really sign up for that exactly.
Yeah, and he must feel pretty badly being shut out in this way, which again I think goes to the didactic element of what you were describing, that Moshe is going to learn something by getting a chance to have what he wished for and see what happens.
But what about Yoshua playing the part here? When he says, look, I didn't hear what was going on behind the cloud when you were in charge. How do we read that?
So I think we can read it one of two ways. I think if we want to be generous towards Yehoshua, maybe he is modeling, recognizing, right, that he too maybe one day will be in Moses's position, that now it's his time. It's no longer Moshe's time, but in the future, perhaps it's also not going to be Yehoshua's time. On the other hand, we can read it less generously, which is to say that maybe Yehoshua should have known or could have known just on a human level that this was going to be hard for Moshe. And maybe he could have answered more softly. The question is, what tone of voice did he say this in, right? I mean, he could have said the same thing in a different tone, and it would have meant something differently. He could have said this very kindly. When the divine speech was revealed to you, would I know that it was speaking to you? That, just very kindly. Or he could have said this as a rebuke.
Right. It's interesting because it does raise the question, right? Let's say there's a jealousy. Does the object of the jealousy, meaning the person of whom you are jealous, do they have any responsibility, right? I'm thinking about Yosef telling his dreams to his brother, right? The question of, are there factors, is there a performativity that the person of whom you're jealous might be doing that's provoking? Or do we say, no, that's what it is. People are allowed to live their lives and be who they are. And whether Yoshua said that in the softest way or said it in a rebuking way, it's possible that Moses would have heard it in a rebuking way regardless.
That's true.
Because that's where he is.
No, that's true. I think though this is where the question of jealousy and limitation really comes up, because the sense that it's not just that I want something that someone else has, but I'm entitled to something that someone else has. That's what jealousy is. And so the sense of entitlement is not recognizing our own limitations, that all of us, to varying degrees, we receive all kinds of good things in our lives and also not so good things in our lives. And it's not entirely up to us. So I guess I think that there's something, maybe Yehoshua or whoever it is should be a little bit humble. He shouldn't brag, which he doesn't. He doesn't say, oh, now it's my turn. You had your turn. Go away.
Right. But I think what's something that's coming to the fore is loss.
Yeah.
Because when you feel entitled to something, yes, it's true. This Midrash makes it very clear. Moses actually had something and he lost it.
Yes.
He had the ability to see behind that cloud. But I think in general, when we're jealous, the fact that we feel entitled to something, it's almost like, hey, you took that from me, right? Even if you actually didn't. It's just something that I think I should have. It's something I almost think I do have in some potential world, and you've taken it from me. There is a sense of loss that I think is very real to people. And I think, by the way, that goes into to whom do you compare yourself, right? Have you ever seen a situation where someone's comparing themselves to someone who really is not in their orbit?
Yes.
Right? In a sense of, I should be able to do that. And you look at them and say, but that's not either your skill set, or it's not actually what your life looks like, or you just have a whole different set of cards that you're dealing with. And the idea that you think that should be yours or is yours is actually a misunderstanding of reality.
Yes.
Right? Like you choose even a rivalry that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. And this all reminds me of the story of Cain and Abel, which I think
How could it not?
Right. It really is about jealousy, and it is about the results of jealousy, which is murder, and Cain becoming murderous. And if we recall, God says to Cain, why are you looking so downtrodden? Basically calm down and it'll be okay. If you don't calm down, I think he says, God says something like, sin crouches at your door. And of course, what happens is that Cain goes and murders Abel. And I think the punishment is very interesting here, is that Cain is a wanderer, never able to find peace. And that's really what jealousy is. So this is really where the punishment fits the crime.
Yeah, that's interesting. You kind of, you're circling and circling and circling. All right, well, let's see what Moshe does when there's sort of this realization of, I'm feeling a loss. It's been given over to someone else. There's a zero-sum experience of this. Ota sha'a, at that moment, Sa'ak Moshe Amar, Moshe shouted and said, Mea mitot, I'd rather 100 deaths, velo kina achat, rather than one instance of jealousy. And then the Midrash says, and Solomon made this explicit, articulated this beautifully in Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, chapter 8, Pasuk of verse 6. Ki azah kamavet ahava, as love is as strong as death. Kashe kishaol kin'ah, jealousy is as cruel as the grave. The love that Moshe loved Joshua and the jealousy that he felt from about Joshua or of Joshua, they were commensurate, his jealousy with his love. Now, I'm a little shocked by this, to be honest, meaning I'm not shocked. I'm amazed and I'm in awe of the idea that Moshe says, I would rather die than be jealous, right? What I think shocks me is I always tell my children, you know, the famous Jewish adage, people are jealous of everyone except for their child or their student. And in some ways, this is somewhat damning of Moshe, that he could be jealous of Joshua. I mean, what exactly has he been preparing him for his whole life, if not a moment like this? It kind of reminds me of a flip side, a mirror image. If you look in Numbers chapter 11, there's this whole notion that God says to Moshe, look, you need help. I want you to bring 70 people, and those 70 people, bring them to the tent of meeting. I'm going to give them the possibility of prophecy so that we can lighten your load. And everybody comes except two. Two guys stay and prophesy, don't come to the tent of meeting. Quite frankly, resist the centralization of this kind of prophetic power, even as it's going to be expanded. And Yoshua turns to Moshe and says, you should put those guys in jail. And Moshe says, Hamekane atali, are you jealous on my behalf? I wish God would give prophecy to everyone. Right? Now, this is really interesting. It's the mirror image of that moment. And now he's feeling, I am actually jealous of the fact that he has and I don't have.
Yeah. I think it is, it's kind of an amazing text because it shows us how human Moshe is. Even Moshe is jealous. And I think that, of course, being jealous is very problematic. We shouldn't be jealous. It's self-destructive, but it's also very human. And I think that part of what the rabbis are doing is acknowledging that this is the way people are. Even Moshe Rabbeinu has some jealousy. Now, I think it also points to the way in which God has compassion for Moshe, because actually not entering the land is better for Moshe, because otherwise he would be consumed by his jealousy.
Well, and you know, I think this is as amazing for what it says as for what it doesn't say, right? Moshe doesn't say, he doesn't do a bunch of things that people who are jealous choose to do, right? They choose to pretend that they're not jealous, right? They choose to pretend that what the other person has isn't such a big deal. Oh, no big deal. That's fine. And they make themselves feel better. Oh, that's not, you know what? It comes with all these problems. Why would you want that, right? He also doesn't choose to complain to God.
Right.
He basically realizes, hey, wait, this was my idea.
That's right.
Right? He doesn't turn to God and say, why aren't you talking to me? He turns to Moshe and realizes, oh no, this is not about the thing itself. This is now about you. That's a real problem, right? He also doesn't say, I want to die because I'm losing my identity as someone who can hear God. He says, I want to die because I'm losing my identity as somebody who's not jealous of the person I love.
That's right. And that this is also, I think, going back to Song of Songs, love is as strong as death, is that even if Moshe dies, which of course he does, he still has his love for Yehoshua.
Yeah, meaning he'd rather die with that love.
Yes,
right.
Because love is as strong as death, meaning as powerful as death, meaning as definitive of human life as death. I mean, just as the way death transcends life, love also transcends life. It goes beyond it.
Okay, but let's spend a minute talking about these instances of jealousy, right? We have here, I've lost something to you. Moshe's lost something to Yehoshua, right? His stature, his authority, and maybe this also applies to people who vied for the same job,
yes.
right? And one of them got it because it was really a zero-sum game, right? And the situation of that is really palpable, right? You literally took something that I had or I wanted. But I do think, again, it's interesting to consider situations where jealousy is just my perception that you have something of mine because I want it too. It's not actually something that's mine that you then got. It's just the jealousy of comparing myself to you. You have a better family life. You have a happier disposition. You have a higher paying job. You have more free time. Whatever the issue, maybe it's actually, I'm just jealous of your success.
That's right. Well,
right? That's what it is.
Right. I mean, going back, I'm going to go back to Cain and Abel once more. Just because God accepted or loved what Abel sacrificed doesn't mean, doesn't have anything to do in a certain sense with God's response to Cain's sacrifice. But that's the misunderstanding, is that Cain believes that because Abel got something good, that this has been taken away from him. But that's not the case.
Right. There's some perception of zero sum. There's some perception of a seesaw.
That's right.
That when you have, I'm not saying that isn't always true, which is the example where we're vying for the same job.
Yeah.
But there are other ways where it's, so I think my question that I'm sitting with is, okay, jealousy is real. It's about a sense of loss, of something you're entitled to, feel entitled to, something you had. Jealousy is something that is, as the verse in Proverbs says, it rots your bones.
Yes.
Better to be dead.
Yes.
Right? You're circling, you're wandering, you have nowhere to be. So now what? How do you actually deal with it? Right? So, because this is a real emotion, it's a real feeling that people experience. How do you actually deal with it? And I'm curious to see if the end of this midrash gives us a sort of a jumping off point to talk about it, because I think at first glance, the end of this midrash doesn't really solve our problem. Okay? So here's how it goes. Kevan shekibel alav lamut. Once Moshe accepted that he would die, right? Essentially asked for death, which is, right, it's a complete reversal. He was asking, all I want is life. And then he realized, no, life of a certain quality, life of a certain quality. Once he decided he was willing to die, Hitchil HaKadosh Baruch Hu mefaiso. God began to placate him. Amar lo, God said to Moshe, Chayecha ba'olam hazeh hinhagta et banai. In this world, right, kind of like, I swear, in this world, you led my children. Af la'atid lavo, also in the future. Al yadecha, by your hand, ani manhigotan, I will lead them. Wait a second. Is he being promised that he's going to lead them again in the future? Or is God saying, you've created a model of leading and I'm going to use that model into the future? Because the verse that's cited is a verse in Yeshayahu in Isaiah 63:11 that is a very strange verse. Vayiskor yemei olam Moshe amo. Now, literally, it should be translated here as, he remembered the days of old, Moses, his people. But actually, if you look in the Jewish Publication Society translation, it actually says, God remembered the way God pulled God's people. Moshe, like minamai mishitihu, I pulled him out of the water. I actually think the end of this midrash is not saying you're going to inhabit that role again. I think this Midrash is saying, what you've done is enough. And what you've done will serve as a model going forward. And I'll pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that part of what's going on here goes back to this issue of what we're entitled to and what we're not entitled to. We're not entitled to have everything we want all of the time. I mean, to put it very simply, even Moshe, right, who was a great leader, isn't entitled to go on and not to die. I think that's part of what's going on here. He has a limit as well. But what we are entitled to, I think, is to see the ways in which our lives are interconnected to all of life. And I think, in a sense, that's what God is saying, is that you, Moses, have lived, you've led the people. The people will be led through your legacy going forward. And so that's what we do leave behind. But I think that we all, none of us is Moshe, right, Rabbeinu, but we all, in different ways, regardless of who we are or where we are interconnected with others. And our lives do, limited though they may be, they do connect with all of life.
Okay, so then let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
That's fine for the Rabbi Emeritus.
Yes.
I lost my position, but I did so much. What about the person who looks and says, you have a better family life than I do?
Yeah.
You have a better job than I do.
Yeah.
You're more successful than I am. How is that person supposed to look and say, what I have is enough?
Yeah. No, I think it's very tough. And this is where I think that what part of what our Midrash is showing is that jealousy is very human. To be human is to be jealous. And so again, it's not to say, oh, I'm going to pretend I don't feel that way. We should acknowledge that feeling. And then the question is, what kind of information does that emotion give us? Does this emotion of jealousy point to something that we think we're entitled to but aren't? For instance, I'd love to be president of the United States, which I really wouldn't, by the way, but let's pretend that I would. But I'm not. I mean, but I'm not entitled.
I don't say who I'm voting for,
I'm not,
so I'm not.
But let me just be clear. I'm not. I'm very happy not to be president of the United States. But let's just say I could say I'm entitled to that. But yes, am I entitled to have a good family and to have had loving parents? Yes, but sometimes life is unfair. And sometimes we don't get the things that we are entitled to. I do think actually that is an entitlement, that we should be treated kindly. We should treat others kindly. But I think the way then that one has to deal with that is to acknowledge the jealousy, but then to think about how can I constructively change my life for the better, not by spinning negativity and obsessing about what I don't have, but rather by building upon what I do have. I think that's very difficult, but I think it's also something very human.
Okay, so I'm going to try this on. I'm going to try on, I think it's 4 approaches to dealing with jealousy, okay? 1, like you say, am I actually entitled to the thing that I'm jealous of? Is that actually something I could have done, should have done, was taken from me? Like reality check. That's 1. A 2nd, am I able to accept limitation in life? Am I able to accept that part of being human, to accept limitation? 3, is it always a zero-sum game? Is it possible that I could turn my jealousy into envy, as you might call it, of, you're doing great, maybe I should learn from you and see how I can grow if it's possible for me to do? And then I would go with the last, which is, if jealousy is strong, the way love is strong, then in some ways you're asking us to say, given all the difficulties, what is it, rather than letting jealousy rot the bones, what is it that I want to do that I love, that I want to love and be part of and create, even if it's more limited than what I thought I would be able to do. And I don't think all of that is in that midrash, but I do think that even being able to build on the experience of the way the rabbis are describing Moshe's outrage at his own jealousy, it's pushing us to think about what we can do in the face of our own jealousy, because it's not good.
Yes, that's right.
It's not healthy.
But it's also very human, and we need to acknowledge it in order to turn it into something better.
Yep. Yes, we do. Thank you so much, Leora. Thanks for listening to our show, and special thanks to my chavruta this week, Leora Batnitzky. Texting is produced by Tessa Zitter, with production assistance from Gabe Scherzer. Our senior producer is M. Lewis Gordon, and our executive producer is Maytal Friedman. This episode was mixed by Ben Acevedo at Bear Cave Audio, with music provided by Luke Allen. We're always looking for ideas for what we should cover in future episodes. So if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, or if you have comments about this episode, please write to us at texting@shalomhartman.org. For more ideas from the Shalom Hartman Institute, sign up for our newsletter in the show notes and subscribe to this podcast everywhere podcasts are available. See you next time, and thanks for listening to my hoarse voice. Hopefully the next episode will be sponsored by some sort of cough medicine.